Hello Bruins, we're going to talk about photosynthesis today, and before we talk about photosynthesis we have to talk about light energy and how chlorophyll, the pigment, absorbs that light energy and help us to convert that energy, taking carbon dioxide and water and make food. Now we know that energy flows through the ecosystem and the ultimate source of energy is the sun. And what takes the sun and converts that energy, taking that carbon dioxide and water and convert it to organic molecules, and that's autotrophs and producers. And then that energy is then later used in organisms to break down into a molecule called ATP, which is used to do all our cellular work. And examples of autotrophs are plants, of course, single-celled algae or multicellular algae, and cyanobacteria. All these organisms can take that light energy and convert carbon dioxide and water and make organic molecules. Now, light is part of the electromagnetic spectrum, and it's part of what's called the physical light, visible light, and this light is what we can see with our naked eyes. And we measure this light by wavelengths. So the smaller the wavelengths, the greater the energy. So here in the spectrum you have 380, that has greater energy. It's a shorter wavelength, say, versus the red light, which is about 750 nanometers. Now, light can be absorbed, reflected, or transmitted. So we see green because that's reflected, and all the other colors are absorbed. So chlorophyll is what absorbs the light, and here's the molecule. You don't have to memorize this, but it's a really neat molecule where it has a metal in the middle, magnesium, and it has these chlorophyll rings, and when light hits it, it breaks these double bonds and releases electrons. Now, there are other types of chlorophyll, like carotenoids. So here's an example of a carotenoid, and again you see the carbon rings and double bonds. Now this shows that different pigments absorb different wavelengths, and this maximizes the amount of light that a plant can absorb. And notice that the green and the yellow region is a region where the light is least absorbed. So chlorophyll A absorbs the most, like indigo, the purple light, and the very red light. And chlorophyll B is great in absorbing the blue and the orange red light. And the carotenoids are here in between. So by having many pigments, a plant can make sure it absorbs the most light. Now, when that electron is excited by that light energy, it's eventually accepted by this molecule called NADP. And if you remember, in cellular respiration, we had NAD+. It also is an electron carrier. Here in photosynthesis, a very similar molecule called NADP. And it does the same thing, it accepts electron. And when it accepts electron, it becomes NADPH. So what happens is when the light hits the atom, the electrons gets excited, and that excited electron moves to an outer orbit energy level. And what happens if that electron is not accepted by another molecule, it'll fall back to its original orbit, and that energy is then released as heat or light. Now, where does photosynthesis occur? Leaf is the organ where photosynthesis occurs, and in the leaf, as you can see in this middle layer, the mesophyll layer, the word meso means middle, phyll means leaf, is where most of that photosynthesis is occurring. And it's occurring in an organelle called chloroplast. Just like the mitochondria, the chloroplast is an organelle with double membrane. It has outer membrane, inner membrane, and inside is basically fluid called a stroma. And it has these stack of green discs, and each green disc is called a thylakoid. And this thylakoid disc inside has a space, which is called thylakoid space. And then outside the thylakoid is a stroma. And this whole stack of thylakoids are called granum. Also, in terms of leaf structure, you have these openings that are called stomates. And stomates allow oxygen to leave and carbon dioxide to enter, which you need for photosynthesis. And these openings are controlled by these special cells called guard cells. Now, we did microscope work during class, so you should know these parts of the leaf. We're having a quiz sometime this week. And so if you look up here, like B is the cuticle, and it's a waxy coating that protects the leaf. And it has this upper layer, just like your skin, it's called the epidermis. And then below the epidermis, you have a layer of cells called the palisade cells. And notice you have these dots, and these dots represents chloroplast, and where a lot of photosynthesis occurs. Then here in the middle layer, you have like the spongy layer, also called the mesophyll layer. And here you have mesophyll cells. And here you have a lot of exchange of carbon dioxide and oxygen. And then you have your vascular bundle surrounded by these cells called the bundle sheath cells. And then you have these vessels that water and nutrients flows through. So the top part is called xylem. That's where water flows, and where nutrients and sugar flows is phloem. And then you have the lower level, which is a lower epidermis, and then again you have your cuticle. Now notice here you have an opening that's called the stomata, and which is controlled by these guard cells. Now, if you remember in class, we separated the pigment, the chlorophyll pigment in spinach leaves, and we saw when we separated that it had many pigments, and then the way we calculated the pigments is what we call the RF value. So first we have the distance of the solvent that we first measure, and that's going to be the denominator, and then we measure from the starting point each pigment, and that's going to be a numerator, and that's how you calculate your RF value. So we're going to talk later about the overview of photosynthesis. Remember, we have carbon dioxide and water, and with that light energy converts this carbon dioxide and water into an organic molecule such as glucose, and oxygen is released as a waste product.